unanswered questions about
Chucky.
Number 1.
How did Chucky's remains get from Missouri to New York? And
Number 2.
what part of the story are we missing? The ending of this movie surprisingly doesn't end on a cliffhanger, but it does pose some questions. Because at the end of this movie, Chucky gets turned into ground beef from that fan in the carnival ride that took place in Brownsville, Missouri. We know this is in Missouri and not Illinois, which is the most common belief, because Chucky shows us the exact address that he was mailed to. This is where he mailed himself to get to Andy. So in a sense, Chucky fails his mission for the 3rd time. Case closed, right? Wrong. Because by the time we get the bride of Chucky, Tiffany is picking up his bad remains at an evidence depository in Lockport, New York. Not Missouri. Not Chicago, where Andy and Charles is from. Not New Jersey, which is Chucky's home state where he's actually buried at. But New York. So, how does that work? Here's the real mystery. Who the hell shipped this shredded doll halfway across the country, and why? What's the missing story here? Why would Missouri police send him to New York? Better yet, why would they even care about some shredded up doll at a carnival ride? Was this some interstate case swap? Like Lockport PD was investigating a crime somehow linked to Charles Lee Ray? I mean, I doubt it. The dude's been buried for 10 years. So did Tiffany bribe her way into possession of it? We know she did in New York, but she pulling strings state by state? That still doesn't make any sense. But I suppose it's possible. It seems like a lot of work just to get your stitched up boyfriend back together, but then again, Tiffany is one of those ride or die lunatics, you know what I mean? And Tiffany Valentine, I'm just woohoo. It's hard to decipher what exactly happened and what the cover story was pertaining the events and the ending of this film. So what's the narrative? Did Andy solely take the blame for this and blame the good guy doll once again? I wouldn't think so, because you might say after the events of this film, these characters in this story, such as Andy, De Silva, Tyler, are never mentioned or seen again, and this chapter of Camp Military is over. But that's not true. Later in the franchise, Child's Play 3 does get revisited, and it does hint at this untold story. But we'll talk about that in number 3. But either way, even when we do talk about my next number 3, it still doesn't answer this question. Matter of fact, it convolutes things. But let's not jump too far ahead. Why did the Lockport PD from New York even want from a mangled doll in Missouri? What paperwork exists that justifies moving evidence from state to state? Evidence? Chain of custody? Well, like an evidence chain of bullshit. Either Tiffany greased the right palms, what a lucky guy, or somebody in law enforcement was dumb enough to think that a possessed doll was worth transferring from Missouri to New York, which is a state that has nothing to do with Charles Lee Ray, or Chucky, or the events of any of the previous films, that was worth crossing the state lines. Whatever the reason, this is still one of the strangest gaps in this franchise, because Bride of Chucky takes place only months after Child's Play 3, so there isn't a huge gap there. So not only can Chucky cheat death, he can cheat the legal system, but apparently he also cheats geography.
Number 3.
Did Andy actually graduate from Kent? And does this expand the story of Child's Play 3? Let's finally dig into this one, because this is my most exciting question, or 2 questions, in this video. Andy's return in Curse of Chucky was one I feel like was the perfect ending to the franchise. But we'll see how that turned out. But in that little post-credit scene with Andy's cameo, there's a small little detail that blows Child's Play 3 wide open again. I'll play that clip for you right here.
Bingo.
Andy actually has a graduation certificate from Kent, which means he went back to Kent to finish his training. I mean, this is huge, right? Despite Child's Play 3 being mostly lower tier amongst the fans, if you follow the sequels, it hints back at this Child's Play 3 story a little bit more and more. If we fast forward to Curse of Chucky again, not only do we have the Kent graduation certificate, we have his sweater. Nika finds an online article saying that this crime remains unsolved, which does align with Bride of Chucky, because the evidence locker that Chucky is in also says that it is unsolved. So no one was blamed for the murders? I should note that this article does say that a student mentioned something about a good guy doll. So Andy did go back to Kent. So could that mean that he continued his romance with De Silva and eventually it just didn't work out for obvious reasons? His paranoia of old Chuckaton over there? Could Andy have an extended friendship with Tyler that we never saw play out? Or could it be that both De Silva and Tyler both decided to leave it all behind them and just move forward with their life, while Andy stayed back, finished his training for his own self-discipline? Either way, it's cool to see that there's a story here that we were never told, and we got a glimpse of Andy's life during the gaps and his absence during the franchise. What do you think happened during the events after this film that the franchise hints when they talk about the events of Child's Play 3? Let me know down in the comments. Number 5. Was Sullivan and his crew stalking Andy? It's already known that in the beginning of Child's Play 2, the company almost went under because of the negative image the murders of the first film brought. Child's Play 2 made it even worse. And it doesn't help that an actual employee of the Good Guy doll factory was murdered. That explains why it took them 8 years to even consider about bringing the Good Guy doll back into production. So I expect Sullivan to go meet with his board members to discuss the status of Andy and his current life to see if they're in the clear to bring back the Good Guy doll. However, if we look at the fine details of this scene right before the death of Sullivan, where Chucky accesses the file about Andy Barclay and his arrival at Camp Military, this is much bigger than you think. Here's why. If we backtrack a little bit, right before shit hits the fan, we can already see on Sullivan's computer that he has a document on Andy Barclay already open. So he was researching Andy at the same time he was talking to this dude right here. What makes this even more bizarre is that Sullivan knew he was heading to Kent days before he even arrived. Andy doesn't arrive until a few days later. Now I say a few days later, not the next day. In movie time it might seem like the next day, but this can't be the case. Andy and Chucky arrive at Kent the same day. But Chucky had to magically mail himself from Chicago all the way to Missouri. I say Chicago because the headquarters, the doll factory, and Sullivan's office is all based in Chicago. And since earlier in the video, we know for a fact that Kent is in Missouri, there's no way possible Chucky can mail himself to an entirely different state in a matter of less than 1 day. It's a few business days at least. So Sullivan did know Andy was going to Kent days before he even arrived. It makes me wonder how long Sullivan and his crew had been keeping tabs on Andy in such an obsessive manner. And who was his plug for this inside information? Shouldn't that be classified since he's still a minor? And he's only 16 at this point. But I guess money really does talk. But this opens up an uglier door. Who inside PlayPals is calling in favors? Did Sullivan bribe a social worker? Pay off the foster family clerk? Is he paying off a cop in youth services? There's definitely some dirty money power playing here. But how long was this going on? And who is Sullivan's inside scoop? Rapid fire round. We're not going to talk about how this rag appears, disappears, and then reappears around his neck again. What? Wyhurst says Shelton's full name is Fred C. Shelton.
Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Fred C. Shelton. He's God around here.
However, Shelton's uniform lists his name as B. Shelton. Which one is it? So I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I would expect that if you're in the military shooting guns, you should have eye protection and ear protection. Just saying. One of the most unsettling things about this movie is when Chucky is swapping out the paintball rounds for the live ammunition. You just know bad shit's gonna happen. But I have some questions about this. Number one, there is no way a military academy wouldn't teach their students the first rule of using a firearm. When you're given a firearm, you must always check it to see if it's loaded and what kind of ammunition it has. Question number two, I don't think it's possible for these paintball rounds and live ammunition rounds to be exchangeable. If you put the live rounds in there, the firearm should be rendered useless, right? Another question I have, at some point during that day, which we can see still day right here, and that entire night, nobody would have discovered Sergeant Botnick's body. One would think they would stop the war games. But apparently, this never happened. Bro, they can't even spell juvenile right. What the fuck? Does Sergeant Botnick have a hair fetish? I'm pretty sure he does. It's one thing to love doing your job. Like, he's that guy. Giving his personality, his authority in there, putting the fear of God into the children. But something's a little off about him. He hates long hair on men. He hates long hair on women. But it's almost like he likes it there so he can get rid of it. So I wonder what Sergeant is into behind the scenes. You know? I wonder if he likes to shave things off after hours. You know what I mean? Disgusting. Also, Botnick tells Andy that he has to cut his hair on Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Bro, you just cut his hair yesterday.
Yeah, baby. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Number 8.
What happened to the 1998 production run of the Good Guy dolls? And
Number 9.
does the blood of Chucky mean anything in the production of the Good Guy dolls? And
Number 10.
why are these two things never mentioned again? Not in the sequels, not in the TV show. This is going to be extremely long and complex, since there is a lot of mystery surrounding the production of the Good Guy doll. It may not be that they just simply stopped production at the end of this movie, because in a way they did, but in a way they didn't. Let me explain. Hear me out. Let's see if we can figure all this out together. And also shout out to my Discord people for prompting this question. Let's just start with the beginning of this movie. The all well-known scene that the Good Guy doll production line starts back up again, and then the next day they have a meeting on whether or not they're going forward with the reproduction of the Good Guy doll. But the odd thing about this is that this lady in the meeting straight up says production has already started and they're going to be on the shelf by next week.
The factory is up and running again. We should be in stores by next week.
So what was the point of the meeting? If the dolls were already rolling off the line and they're ready to be on the shelf by next week, what are we talking about? It couldn't have been about Sullivan giving the green light. You're already doing it. Maybe it was about going public. Maybe it was just them trying to claw back some of their investment by pumping out Good Guy dolls with whatever leftover material that was still sitting in the factory. I mean, they hand the first one to Sullivan, which we all know was Chucky, who eventually strangles his ass with that yo-yo string. And we'll talk about the rest of the batch of these dolls in a minute, which is very important, because personally the biggest mystery to me is what happened to the rest of these Good Guy dolls from 1998, because it's never mentioned again. And we'll talk about the rest of the batch of dolls being mixed with Chucky's blood in a minute. But speaking of Sullivan's death, a few days after Sullivan's death, they continued to run commercials to promote the rebirth of the Good Guy doll that we see when Tyler and Andy are getting their hair buzzed. So did they stop production after the events of Camp Military? I can only assume so because again, Bride of Chucky takes place only a few months after this one. And the rest of the sequels never mentioned the production of the Good Guy dolls ever again. Only one time throughout this entire franchise did we learn that the Good Guy dolls are being reissued. And that's in Cult of Chucky when the doctor buys one from Hot Topic. I'll play that clip right here.
Just a Good Guy doll, one of thousands made back in the 80s.
No, where'd you get it?
Hot Topic.
So the doctor claims that he bought one that was from the 80s. This is important. Remember these dates. And throughout the TV show, there are 72 known Good Guy dolls that's also from the 80s. This is in Tiffany's personal collection.
Will receive a priceless gift from her personal collection. 72 authentic Good Guy dolls that will be transported immediately after the show.
Those 72 Good Guy dolls are going to be spread out to children, but that's irrelevant. So we have 72 vintage Good Guy dolls from the 80s, plus one more, which is the one that Jake finds at the yard sale in the pilot episode, so that's 73. The 74th one comes from the prototype when we finally meet the creator of the Good Guy doll. His name is Wendell. He shows us the prototype doll he created before selling the rights to Sullivan and the PlayPal company. This one is also from the 80s, 1987 to be exact.
This is the original Good Guy doll. Prototype in 1987.
So throughout the rest of the franchise, with the films and the TV show, there's a lot of talk about these vintage 80s Good Guy dolls from the original run. But no one ever talks about the second run that happened in 1998 and the events of Child's Play 3. Why aren't these ever mentioned again? I mean, this batch is very special because this batch of dolls are mixed with the blood of Chucky himself. Now, whether this can contribute to the voodoo side of things, I don't know. Is his blood tied to voodoo itself? Could there be multiple Chuckies running around that we never even saw, that perhaps the main Chucky never even knew of? It's very possible, although there's no evidence to prove it. So it's weird that the short run of Good Guy dolls from 1998 that is infused with Chucky's blood are just never mentioned again. So only one doll winds up being resurrected? Why? If his soul is transferred through voodoo, wouldn't his blood also be tied to that? By that logic, every doll that came out of that production line in 1998 should have been Chucky, or possessed in some way. Who's to say there wasn't more? Just because the movie doesn't show us, doesn't mean that it couldn't happen off screen. For all we know, a few more Chuckies rolled off the line and are somewhere out there wreaking havoc in this universe. But I actually lean on the other side of the fence, that most likely this isn't the case. I believe at this time Chucky didn't have enough knowledge of voodoo to be able to split his soul, and his blood alone wasn't enough to rebirth multiple versions of himself without the additional help of Dembala and the voodoo. With all that being said, the biggest question remains. What happened to the 1998 run of Good Guy dolls? And why are these dolls never mentioned again? That's going to wrap this video up, guys. Thank you so much for taking part of your day to kick it with me. I appreciate it. Next up is Bride of Chucky, where we get to watch Chucky get it on with some Woo! With that being said, if you have any theories about Bride of Chucky, or Seed of Chucky, or any of the rest of the films in the franchise, or even the TV show, feel free to drop it in the Discord. The Discord is absolutely free. It's just a hangout spot. We can talk about theories. We can talk about how your day went. You can show me something cool. It really is just a fun place for us to bullshit and hang out every day. I also have YouTube membership where you get early access to all of my videos. I do monthly giveaways. You get loyalty badges, custom emojis, private live streams. The list goes on and on. Don't feel obligated, but you'll be supporting me and this channel. Thank you guys so much once again, and I'll see you in Bride of Chucky. Adios.